Iran's finance minister says the country is fully prepared to counter sanctions. But Iran's currency has already dropped to a record low against the dollar. So will Tehran be able to withstand the impact, or will the government be forced back to the negotiating table? Let's bring in leading Iran expert Karim Sadjadpour. Karim, welcome back to the program. It's been a while. Great to have you on. I want to pick up on what we heard yesterday from Scott Bessent, because Suzanne Maloney, somebody who I know you respect and know well, another Iran scholar, posted this on X shortly after his announcement. She said, predictably, Scott Bessent's economic D-Day rollout is all hype. The emperor has no clothes, and the Trump administration has no actionable plan to undo the immense damage to U.S. national security interests and those of our Gulf partners from Trump's disastrous Iran war. What did you make of his comments? Do you agree with Suzanne's rather blistering assessment?
Bianna, when I speak to colleagues in the Treasury Department, what they see is the beginning of a process to really try to subject Iran to enormous economic pressure in order to bring it to the table and force it into compromise. Now, that strategy is now without precedent. On the only two occasions that Iran has agreed to meaningful compromise from 1979 to the present, it was in 1988 and in 2015 to end the Iran-Iraq War in 1988 and the 2015 Obama nuclear deal. And in both occasions, it was when the country was subject to enormous, perhaps existential economic pressure, coupled with a clear diplomatic endgame. So part of the strategy, I think, has merit in historic precedent, which is to try to subject the regime to enormous pressure. What we don't see is a clear diplomatic strategy and a clear diplomatic endgame.
You talk about how in the past Iran has given in only a handful of times, two that you just listed here, to pressure. And the country, no doubt, is under immense pressure economically right now, in addition to the damage sustained during the military component of this war. The blockade itself has been damaging. Iran exported zero crude in May, down from 2.1 million barrels a day. Iran's own central bank governor admitted this week that oil exports have entirely stopped, though Tehran's economy minister claims that they have a 2-year plan to ride all of this out. Is that bluster, you think, for his population at home, or can they ride this out for 2 years?
Well, this is a regime which has long been willing to subject its population to enormous hardship rather than compromise. And right now it's a regime ruled by Revolutionary Guard commanders who are somewhat insensitive to popular suffering. As you alluded to, Bianna, this is one of the economies which is, there's probably no country in the world with a greater gap between how it's doing economically and what it should be doing economically. Iran should be a G20 nation. It has enormous oil and gas resources. It has enormous human potential, human capacity, but it's suffering from around 70% inflation, a collapsing currency, triple-digit food inflation. And so it is possible that they can withstand this for perhaps another year or so, especially if it's not sustained economic pressure. But at some point, I think that the regime is likely going to have to compromise or face another popular tumult.
The Treasury Secretary gave a preview of his announcement yesterday in an op-ed that he wrote over the weekend in the Financial Times. And he wrote this: "At dawn begins an economic D-Day, the single greatest financial offensive ever marshaled against an adversary. And if, as the regime's grasp on power crumbles alongside its economy, Iran resorts to military action against U.S. forces or its Gulf neighbors, make no mistake, President Trump will respond swiftly and decisively." This was the secretary setting expectations before the announcement, and yet I'd like to play for you what he said in response to a question from our Kevin Liptak.
You described this as an economic D-Day, but D-Day wasn't a threat of an invasion, and the US didn't give a timeline to Germany. So why not impose the sanctions today?
Well, we are giving everyone the opportunity to remedy bad behavior. Why would I want to blow up the global financial system? We believe that it is important to level set and give people a cure period, but they should know that that will move very quickly and that we are serious.
What do you make of his response, and is that an answer that Iranian officials today take seriously in your view?
Well, Bianna, Iran is one of the most isolated economies in the world. The country which will play a decisive role here is China, because around 90% of Iran's oil exports are bound to China. I would say that, absent economic cooperation with China, the Iranian regime wouldn't be able to sustain itself economically. So the big question is whether the Trump administration will go after Chinese companies, sanction Chinese companies, and potentially escalate an economic war with China over this Iran fight. So, that remains to be seen. Another big question is how Iran will choose to retaliate. I think one of the lessons that Iran learned from this war is that you don't win concessions by compromising. You win concessions from the United States by punching back. And they have threatened to go after energy installations throughout the Persian Gulf. And so there is a real danger that Iran chooses to retaliate against this economic warfare by bombing oil and gas installations in the Arab Gulf countries. And it's a big question of whether the United States has the back of those countries.
You referenced China. The secretary was asked about China twice, I believe, yesterday during that announcement and the Q&A with reporters, and he refused to answer specifically to that question. He said that there would be one financial institution that would be sanctioned, a major financial institution that would be named later this week. He didn't say which institution that is or where it is. But if China is in fact included in these secondary sanctions, how significant would that be in your view?
Well, it would be significant, and it remains to be seen how China would respond. Would they simply choose to reduce their economic trade and cooperation with Iran, as they chose to do in 2015, which helped to facilitate the Obama nuclear deal? Or will they choose to retaliate against the United States instead? I think that the challenge that the U.S. has now, in contrast to, let's say, a decade ago, was that what was so important in the Obama nuclear deal was there was a full diplomatic press against Iran. So Europe was firmly on board, and Russia and China had significantly reduced their cooperation with Iran. This time around, Russia is openly siding with Iran. The Europeans are ambivalent about supporting the United States, and China continues to provide Iran an economic lifeline.
Yeah, and it would be hard to see the president really clamping down on China now, publicly at least, since he will be welcoming Xi Jinping to the White House exactly a month from today. Kareem, the latest U.S. Initiatives that were just announced build on more than 1,000 sanctions that the Trump administration has placed on Iran since returning to his second term. And if you look at the 5 sectors that Treasury named yesterday, gold, digital assets, technology, aviation, shipping, and that led one Iran economist to call these lifelines for the Iranian people, not necessarily the regime. So if the goal here is to get the people the help they need and empower them to rise up against these dictators and the authoritarians now running the country, do you think this actually does more harm to them? Is there any merit to this economist's point?
Well, Bianna, I think that the point is an important one, which is that what is the strategic goal here? Because, yes, we have seen historically that under enormous pressure, this regime is capable of compromise, but that is when there is a kind of a clear diplomatic strategy in mind. If we essentially telegraph to them that the U.S. goal here is to implode the regime, they're certainly not going to compromise. They have 100% resolve to stay in power because their view is it's kill or be killed. But if we articulate kind of a more limited diplomatic goal to wrestle back the Strait of Hormuz from Iran, to get some nuclear compromises, some regional compromises, that is a potentially viable strategy. And certainly the Iranian people, it's been a terrible 2026 for the people of Iran, because when they did rise up last January, they were slaughtered en masse. And this war has just brought about more hardship for the people of Iran and an even more brutal regime.
Slaughtered by the tens of thousands. Karim Sadjapur, always important to remember that. Senior Fellow at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace, thank you, as always, for joining us
Thank you,
for
Bianna.
Perspective.